This week in our course, we're going to turn to India with an emphasis on the Indus Valley tradition and also the development of Hinduism. From there, next week, we will take a look at Buddhism and we'll talk specifically about the tenets, the teachings of the Buddha, and the way that Buddhism will spread into China and surrounding regions such as Japan. Let's begin with a word about geography, which is really important in shaping the worldviews of people. We already saw that in the Middle East, where the emphasis within practice, ritual practice, and prayer focuses on water, in addition to water being the kind of foundation for the underlying description of paradise within Islam. In India, we have, in contrast, very, very different geography. We have great rivers and we also have great mountains. In fact, we have the tallest peak in the entire world. That I think everybody knows is Mount Everest, and we're looking at it. It is majestic and it's imposing. What we're going to expect is that the mountains, which are awesome to look at as you live in India, are going to be associated with the realm of the gods. They're also going to be sacred, and many of these mountains are going to be considered to be the home of the gods. We'll see a picture later of Mount Kailash, and Mount Kailash is believed to be the home of the great god Shiva. Because of their significance, we're also going to see that the mountain, the form of the mountain itself, is going to become a model for architecture. The rivers also are going to be important because they're going to be the places where early civilizations arise. People will come to the river, it's a source of water. They're going to build near the river, and ultimately, that is where the cities are going to develop, the great population centers, and the early high civilizations. A significant civilization in India, maybe even a mother culture in India, is the enormously important Indus River Valley civilization, which I think you can all figure out arose around the Indus River Valley. And that's all this green area. Over here, this is a view of the Indus Valley. This civilization is also sometimes referred to as Harappa or Harappan, and that is after this one site right here, which was the first site to be excavated, to be discovered, essentially. This entire civilization was not known until the colonial era, when the British were working in India and they were excavating for a railroad. And it was then that they stumbled across one of the important sites at Harappa, and archaeologists began working. We're still learning, in fact, about the Indus Valley civilization. There are approximately 70 different cities with similar culture that seem to be bound together during this time frame. It is the time when the very earliest high civilizations arose. It's about the same time period that high civilization was developing in ancient Egypt and also in the ancient Middle East in the region of the Sumerians. One of the Indus Valley civilizations, the sites, is Mohenjo-daro, located today in Pakistan. It's 3.1 in our textbook, and what you're looking at includes the bath, which is the top left, and also the diagram, a portion thereof, of the city. The city was incredibly well planned with very wide streets, walled communities. The streets are set at angles, so there's a geometry that underlies the creation of this site. And it is estimated that some of these buildings originally went up to 3 stories. We're talking pretty sophisticated here. And I think O'Reilly's suggesting the population level of around 35,000. The city itself also seems to have cared about cleanliness. There is a sewer system that is included in the planning system of the city layout. And in addition to that, there is this, and we do believe it is ritual, very ritual or very large ritual bath. So we think that it was probably used for ritual purification, not just simply taking a bath and getting clean physically, but also that it may well have been used for rituals. The reason that that's important is that the Indus Valley civilization does, we think, act as a kind of foundation for the later civilizations that develop in India. And I'm going to say that would include the religious and cultural practices that go along with Hinduism, one of which is an incredible emphasis on purity, on purification. So we might be seeing this way back here. That's not to say that this couldn't also have been used for water for the residents, but we do think that it is a precedent for the emphasis on purity or purification that will later come along, even applying to Hindu castes. Clearly, we can see it's a well organized, well planned city. And let me see what else I have for us. Okay. It was walled so that there was a separation in terms of the compounds of where people lived. You could walk between the compounds, and that's what we're looking at in the top left. That is one of the streets. We've, through the excavations, also discovered the beautiful and sophisticated jewelry. That is, I think I could wear that, folks. Located right up here, just some of it. That's been found made out of gold. We also have discovered child's toys like the wheeled. I'm going to say it's a horned animal with, well, maybe, with a little tail on the back of it. So we have signs of family life. We have signs of urban life. We have signs of luxury. And we also know that there was a gaming district. I'd like you to be thinking about Atlantic City. One of the sections revealed upon excavation dice that we're looking at right here, not just these, but in addition, there were others, and it suggests that the city was divided into separate districts where certain activities were limited or took place in those regions. Very modern in a number of ways. Among the important finds at Mohenjo-Daro and other sites of the Indus Valley are the seals and the impressions that survive or can be made from those original seals. We have at least 2,000 seals. These are very small. They have been carved out of steatite, kind of soft stone that was not difficult to work. And we have made modern impressions of them, which can be observed more clearly because we'll know what the originals look like. But they also, in those modern impressions, allow us to see that these seals were very accurate in terms of recording details about the animals, and there are a lot of animals on these seals. This one, and this is the seal itself. This is a bull, and it tends, the animal, but also the creation of it by the artist, has shown us a sense of strength, of muscularity. It's got very, very large sweeping horns. Horned animals are often associated in early civilizations around the world with strength and virility and with masculinity. Those horns also, if we come up here and look at this and at this, are echoed in these forms, which are writing. All of this up here is an early text that often accompanies images on these seals. So it's exciting. The good news is the folks here had writing. The bad news is we really don't know how to read it. In the future, I'm hoping that we will, and with that knowledge, we'll be able to unlock a lot of the mysteries associated with this early civilization. It is quite possible that this early image may be associated with Shiva in some way. The bull, as we'll see later, becomes a companion and associate of Shiva, and the bull and the horns are references to male potency, which also will be strongly associated with the god Shiva. This also is pretty well placed on that tiny seal. And I would like to suggest it's monumental and grand looking. However, it's really tiny. It only measures 1.3 inches square. Nevertheless, it has a kind of swelling quality, a fluid quality, a kind of sense of smooth, continuous shaping that conveys an inner kind of almost pulsing vigor to the animal. This is going to continue throughout the creations in the future of Hindu art. So, this swelling quality, this vigor that is inherent in these early, very tiny images may, in fact, suggest a continuous tradition in the arts as well as in the belief system that is being passed along. I'd also like to suggest it's pretty well composed for a tiny little thing. We have a bowl, a rather massive, imposing bowl, that takes up this portion of the composition, and it's kind of balanced out by the writing up above. The person who crafted this, I'm fairly confident, was well aware of the placement of all of the elements on his seal. These are seal impressions that have been made from seals that have been found, just to give you a range of the animals that are depicted and the way in which they are incorporated with writing. We have some more bowls located in the top section, and then we have an elephant located over here, and I'm thinking this little guy is a rhino. Yep, that's what my label says. The thing I also wanted to point out, particularly with the bulls, is that all three of them have this, and we aren't quite sure what that is. It could be a feeding station for the bull, but more likely it's been suggested that it is a fire altar, which would have been used in sacrifice, and fire altars have been found in these cities. Why is that significant? A fire altar will remain important later in Hinduism. Just a possibility. This is another slide of some of our seals. If you take a look at the top left, you're actually going to see the real seals that were carved in this soft stone. And then on the right, you're going to see one of the most famous of the fragments. Sadly, this one's broken, of work that came out of Indus Valley civilization. It's figure 3.2b in our textbook, and it is a seated figure. And generally, it's thought to be someone who is seated perhaps in an early yoga position. Typically, there is writing at the top of this, right up here, but we also have a series of animals, and even below, it's been suggested that this individual might be the master of animals, essentially being responsible for perhaps fertility or virility. And in addition, it's been suggested that this might be an early version of the god Shiva. It is an important figure, partly because of I'm going to suggest he's seated on a throne-like structure, but also because of the horned headdress that he is wearing. And that two-pronged headdress, which has a central portion, may easily evolve into the trident of Shiva. Can't prove it, but it is one of the suggestions that's already been made. I do have a couple more images that might help us to be maybe favorably convinced that this is associated with Shiva. The pose that the person is in the cylinder seal impression, and what we're looking at in the top section right here, two different photographs of a modern impression. This itself is not the original seal, but this is what the impressions look like. That individual is seated cross-legged, very much as a person, a modern person. Now, I've got two for you at the bottom who are actually engaged in yoga. And there is the below your waist portion of the yoga posture, the cross-legged portion. And then there is the arm extension, which often ends in a hand gesture, a symbolic hand gesture or a mudra. And I do have one right here, her hand gesture, which does kind of match the impression in the cylinder seal. The great god Shiva today maintains a relationship with yoga. He is associated with it deeply, which allows us to make a stronger argument again that this might be an ancestor of Shiva, and that the Indus Valley might indeed be a kind of mother culture.